Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense. It's your favorite podcast on the internet, I assume. It is the show where me and John talk about pro wrestling and whether or not it makes sense. And a lot of the time it doesn't. Does it today? Is this the week where it makes sense? I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not. But you got to tune in to find out, right? That's what they say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's what they say.
I'm pretty sure that's kind of the gist, isn't it?
Yeah, if you listen to the show, then you'll know the answer by the end of the episode. That's the way it goes. So we today are going to be talking about NXT, or I guess it's called NXT 2.0 now.
Yeah, which I guess is to say that this is like a new NXT, even though I'm pretty sure there's been like a few different incarnations of NXT over the years. You could point to it started off as a game show, for God's sake,
Right.
and then moved into like a proper studio setting and had the actual matches and storylines and stuff. And so I guess this technically should be at least NXT 3.0.
I think that once they went, kind of live against AEW, though, that was I would say that's like the third NXT because it was a little different.
Yeah,
Kind of
yeah.
changed, So I'd say we're up to like 4.0 if we're being, technical about it. And we're always very technical on this show.
Absolutely.
We're very
Technically sound.
Yes, exactly. That's I believe that's what they say about the show. Yeah, we're very, very official. We get everything correct. The only podcast in town we have to be spot on here.
Yeah.
We've never got anything wrong. You can go back and listen to every single episode of this show. Never got a goddamn thing wrong. And we're going to continue that trend today. So we're talking about NXT 4.0, really. But for the sake of simplicity, we'll call it NXT 2.0 because that's what the WWE is calling it. Because like you said, they really want to make like a distinguish between the current NXT and what it was like a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
Which, really, it's still wrestling, really. But whatever.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to split hairs about that because who has the time? It's certainly not me. So to go along with this new NXT 2.0, we've seen some changes. And those changes include the logo, like the branding of the show itself, the setup, like the layout of the studio and the audience and the way everything is kind of laid out like that. We've seen a change in the wrestlers themselves. It seems like there's a big shift to a different set of new up-and-comers instead of relying on a lot of older established indie stars. So I think that, is that all the changes? There's probably something else.
That's pretty much the main stuff, I guess you could say.
Yeah, so let's start with the logo.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be like red and black, like the old warning kind of colors, like on a bee or a wasp.
I thought it was gold and black.
What did I say? Red and black?
Yeah.
I meant to say yellow and black, and I don't know why red and black came out.
Whoops.
I know.
That's our first ever mistake we've made.
I was just about to say, we never get anything wrong in this show. Why did I say red and black? That's weird. I meant yellow and black because you've never seen a red and black bee or wasp. That's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I meant yellow and black. You guys know what I meant. I'm colorblind, all right? That's my excuse. That's how I'm going to get away with it. They're all the same to me. Yes, yellow and black. Like the warning kind of symbol. But also yellow and black, like they go together really well.
Mm-hmm.
As a color scheme. It looks pretty neat. And that was the color of the whole thing since the game show, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that shit's been going on since, when was that? 2010?
Around then, yeah, I think so.
Because the Nexus came out of NXT the game show, and that was in 2010. So I don't think we're gonna dwell on it too much, but you remember that old NXT TV show, the game show?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, I'm not. I don't know how many people, because wrestling fans, we have such short attention spans,
Mm.
or the as the wrestling programs would have us believe, where everything changes week to week. You're like, don't worry about it. They'll forget about it. We remember the old NXT fondly. Oh, so fondly.
Mm.
Oh, the shenanigans that used to get up on that show. Very strange. Very, very strange. It's probably for the best that we don't have to worry about that anymore, that it's a totally different program. It seems strange that they would make a game show at all, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Doesn't it? Like, we're going to find the next best wrestler, and we're going to do that by, running around the ring and cutting promos with mustaches and shit like that. And you're like, I don't think that's going to help. Especially with Daniel Bryan in it.
Yeah, you'd think you'd try and play to his strengths at least.
Yeah, you're like, I wouldn't have put him in there. I would have him, I don't know, wrestle. Again, another one of our wacky ideas on this show. We're full of them, but sometimes I think they're worth listening to. So we've come a long way since the old NXT, the old NXT, that the WWE probably doesn't even want to acknowledge anymore. Do you remember when they did the female NXT game show thing, and like CM Punk was on commentary and Michael Cole was also on commentary, and they just spent the whole time ragging on it?
Yeah, that was when you could kind of tell that whole concept for NXT probably wasn't going to last much longer.
Yeah, if like the company themselves didn't give a shit about it, you're like, this is, and it's a shame that it happened to be the one with the women in it.
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
this is the one you guys make fun of? Like, come on, man. We've seen way worse shit than this. Ridiculous. So they graduated away from that, and then they kind of moved into a more fun, gritty TV show that seemed to be different from Raw and SmackDown. And to go along with that, they had their new yellow and black, yellow and black logo, and now it's no longer yellow and black.
I'm pretty sure there's still some yellow in there, but it's mixed in with a bit of orange and red and purple and blue and green and pretty much every color of the rainbow.
All the colors of the rainbow and a couple of other ones. They just made up some new colors and they put them onto the logo too. Yes, it's a lot more splashy, a lot more in your face, I'd say. It's eye catching.
Yeah, it's definitely a break from, what we're used to with the NXT logo. And I think the logo before had sort of like a heavy metal quality to it. Like it kind of, I mean, obviously it had that association with like the Download Festival as well, where they'd come over to the UK and like set up a ring at the actual, like heavy metal festival, which people could go and watch the wrestling at. Whereas you can't really see that anymore with this new logo with all the flashy colors and whatnot.
Well, maybe.
I mean, it doesn't really feel like it fits anymore.
Did you ever go to the Download Festival and see the wrestling?
No, I last went in like 2005, I think it was. So that was way before they started wrestling. Yeah.
Who was playing then?
I get the feeling that no, I wasn't Iron Maiden. I think they might have been the year before, possibly. I can't remember. I've been to so many festivals that they've all kind of, melted into one.
Wow, I was at like we had like, there was one year they did this weird shoot off of Download where they would do a couple of gigs in Ireland as well, and they called it the Download, but it wasn't really. And I got to choose between Metallica or Guns N' Roses. I went with Metallica, because Alice in Chains were there too.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, worked out because of fucking Korn it was supposed to be Korn, Avenged Sevenfold, and Metallica on the main stage, but then Korn suspiciously pulled out because your man got sick for the whole weekend. He got sick for the whole weekend, and then on Monday he's like, "I'm back. See you later." I'm like, "Oh, interesting how you only got sick." for the weekend. So Alice in Chains got bumped up to the main stage. I'm like, this fucking rips.
Awesome.
This is, and then Avenged Sevenfold came on. I'm like, fuck, they suck. Put Alice in Chains back on. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Bullshit. Anyway, I've never been to a festival where there's wrestling happening. That would be interesting, I gotta say.
Mm.
But yes, it does seem like that old logo had like that kind of like grittiness to it
Yeah.
that I think that they were trying to go with, because that did kind of sum up NXT. Whenever you looked at NXT compared to Raw and SmackDown, it was the grittier show. It wasn't as silly and cartoony.
No, it's
You know?
more of a classic wrestling show compared to, Raw and SmackDown.
Yeah, which is why people liked it better.
Mm.
Although it didn't get the same viewership, but whatever. I think that was mainly because for the most part it was on the network.
Yeah, and then when it did get put on NBC, it was put up against Dynamite as well, so that was splitting the audience too.
Yeah, that probably wasn't a big smart move on their part, but it was still fun to watch, and the changing of the logo to make it much more bright and colorful, I think really set people off, made people think that this is gonna now NXT is gonna be cartoony and silly, kind of like Raw and SmackDown.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's been a little bit of a shift in it. The tone of the show does seem to have changed a little bit. They do continue to talk about pro wrestling and focus on that, but it does seem a little. I mean, to go into the second point where we talked about the production of it, the layout of the show, it seems brighter.
Yeah, definitely.
Like whenever the grittiness doesn't always equal darkness. That's it's a very heavy-handed way of looking at things, but the arena itself in the old NXT did seem kind of the way that it was lit did seem darker, and it did seem to add to that grittiness, if you will. It had a little bit of like an underground feel to it.
Yeah, for sure.
I felt like whenever they were doing over the pandemic, where they had like the big plexi screens and stuff, and they would have like mesh and things like that to hide the audience behind. I thought that gave it a real underground kind of look.
Yeah, more so than Raw Underground.
Yes, which was literally underground. I think I think wasn't that the point? Or it was just like backstage or something. I don't. Nobody really knows about Raw Underground. We have a lot of questions that were never answered.
And to be honest, I'm not too bothered if there are any answers to those questions as well.
Yeah, it's probably best left where it is.
Yeah.
They can keep it. That's fine. We don't need to worry about Raw Underground anymore. I mean, they tried. They gave it 2 months.
Yep. 2 months and never bothered explaining it or, anything.
Nope. But there you go. And that had like the grittiness to it. It was so gritty they couldn't even be bothered to put ropes in. Who needs? So at least NXT has got ropes.
Yeah. Thank God for that.
Nice. That really helps with the wrestling aspect of it.
Mm.
So yes, now to go along with the bright logo, we've now got a brighter set. It doesn't feel as gritty and underground as it used to, although it does still feel like smaller and cooler. I mean, it is smaller obviously, but it does have that little like indie scene kind of thing to it, as opposed to like Raw or SmackDown, which I still like. And it is nice to have the better lighting to be able to see what the fuck's going on.
Plus, they don't have like barricades around the ring, and it's all like, the way it's set up is like almost like a 360 thing with stands right around the ring as well. So it's like, it almost reminds me of the old like WCW when they'd tape shows in Universal Studios back in the day, when they just like plonked down a ring and then had like a crowd around it. Like it has like a similar sort of vibe to that studio feel, which I think is very cool.
That's what I was gonna say. It has like this studio, wrestling aspect to it, which I really like. The way that it's set up and the way that the seats are tiered, it has this studio wrestling kind of vibe to it, which I really like. Because we had talked about, what do you call it? The NWA. Yes, the NWA. Boy, my head is just not screwed on today, is it? Or any day. We had talked about the NWA and how they had set things up and how their entire setup really made them stand out because it looked like no other wrestling company at the moment. No other wrestling production was laid out like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked it. I thought they were a little too heavy-handed with the kind of nostalgia, the old kind of, it had a lot of like old 70s look to it.
Yeah.
Which I think was a little too much because if you look at NXT now, they have that layout, but the modern stage and the modern colors and lighting and stuff like that. And that's the way to do it. That's how you make it stand out and make it relevant in today's climate. Is that the word?
Yeah, that'll do.
Yeah, we'll go with that for now. But it makes it look kind of relevant and different, and I think that looks pretty cool. So, we've had some mixed opinions on the logo, but I think that the layout itself with the better lighting and the way the seats are laid out and stuff, I think that looks really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
So I really like that. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing, as DDP would say. So I really like that. Now, those are some of the aesthetic changes. I think that most people aren't going to give a shit so long as the in-ring stuff, because that's why people watch NXT. The in-ring stuff is great and usually better. The actual content is usually better than the piss that's on Monday Night Raw.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can agree with that. So I think that while some people are grumbling about the new logo and maybe I haven't really heard people grumbling about the new layout, but fucking I'm sure they will because it's the internet. You have to grumble about something. Good Lord. But the real question was, are they going to be able to keep the content good and relevant and interesting and kind of gritty and different from Raw and SmackDown? Less cartoony and less bullshitty and stuff like this. So we're a couple of weeks in, and I think the answer to that at the moment is we don't really know. We've seen a couple of episodes so far, and it's not like wacky shenanigans. There's nobody on unicycles, and there's no midgets, and there's no, people falling over on banana skins, and no people eating crab sticks backstage, and there's nothing like overly silly. But at the same time, and again, we're only a couple of weeks in, so who knows? But at the same time, a lot of the actual wrestling doesn't seem to be there too much.
No, they've changed focus now, so it's not so much about having like fewer matches which are sort of longer and a bit more high quality, whereas now we've got like a fair amount of squash matches every week, like pretty much going less than 2 minutes, most of them as well. So you get those squash matches, and then if you're lucky, you'll get 1 or 2 matches that goes closer to 10 minutes and is more like the NXT of old. But I guess it's all part of the introducing of all these new characters onto the show, because there's been a lot of new characters introduced over the last 3 weeks or so, and I'm not sure they've done a great job of doing it as well. Like, a lot of these guys have just been literally thrown into the ring without any kind of vignette or promo or anything to kind of tell us who they are or what their deal is, or if they're even, good guys or bad guys, basically. So it's been a bit of a mixed bag in terms of trying to introduce these characters to the audience and get us to care about them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that I would describe it as a mixed bag because there's been a couple of guys on the show that after just a couple of weeks you're like, I like this. This is great. This guy, like everybody loves that. I know a lot of people have been really into this Braun Breaker guy.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that's a very clever name that's supposed to sound like Bone Breaker.
I have no idea where it's come from, but I mean, I think his first name is actually Bronson, so I guess
Oh,
that
okay.
explains that.
Is that why they
But
got rid of Bronson Reed? Because you're like, we can't have two Bronsons.
well, this is the thing, man. Apparently, they were originally going to call Braun Breaker Rex Steiner, which is a fan-fucking-tastic name.
Mm.
He sounds like a badass. And plus, it plays into the whole Steiner connection as well, which, you just have to look at the guy and hear him speak to know that he is a
Yes.
Steiner.
Yes, he's very much a Steiner.
Mm.
You watch that guy wrestling, you're like, yep, he's throwing people around like the Steiners. I love whenever you hear him talk, you're like, oh my god, like 100%, that guy's one of the Steiners.
Yeah.
It's so funny. But that guy has taken to it. Like he seems, in just a little bit we've seen, that guy seems to get it. And I don't know how much he's been training or how much wrestling he's done before this, but like you throw him in at the deep end, he seems to be able to swim and no problem. He can talk, he can wrestle. He seems, and again, like we haven't seen him do anything super long term. This is all very, preliminary. But from what we've seen, that guy seems to get it. He seems to know what he's doing, which is good.
Yeah.
But there's other people on there where you're like, I don't know who you people are. And that stuff's harder to get across in squash matches, especially if everybody's in a squash match.
Yeah.
That's hard to do. For example, the episode of NXT I watched started off with, it started off with a bunch of these new guys in the ring. And Tommaso Ciampa comes out and he's like, hey, NXT is great. And then they all kind of brawled for a bit.
Yeah.
And then they cut backstage where a brawl was happening. And then they cut back to the ring where they finished up the brawl with the people. And then they had a Kushida versus Roderick Strong, which would be fun. But I thought that match went a little short.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Which is a shame because I think those guys could tear the house down. And in the old NXT, those guys would have had 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Easily, right? But they had to cut that match short, which was a shame. And then after that, up until the main event, it was just squash matches. Like some of them, I was surprised at how quick they were. I would look away and then look back up, and then the match was over. And that was strange because, like, Kaylee Ray was fighting somebody, and I get that she's been established on NXT UK as a very, very long dominant champion. To have her come out and do a squash match totally makes sense. Because it's a good way to keep the fact that she's super fucking good, right? That just shows it and it adds to that. But a lot of these new guys doing squash matches against other new guys, you're like, I don't know which one's which.
Yeah.
There was a match that went on, I don't know if it couldn't have been more than 2 minutes. And I couldn't tell you who was who. I couldn't tell you who was like the guy they wanted to push in this squash match and who wasn't. And he won. And I'm like, I couldn't tell you the guy's name, but I couldn't tell you the other guy's name either. And that was very, very strange. How do I root for either of these guys? And, it seems like that they're doing their typical thing where they have plans for some of these people. And that's quite clear whenever you look at the main event, which is Braun Breaker and Tommaso Ciampa against Ridge Holland and Pete Dunne. Clearly they got plans for that guy because he's in the main event and he's all over that show. He's working with Tommaso Ciampa. It's very clear that they're teasing this Braun Breaker guy to go up against Tommaso Ciampa for the championship already, which I imagine is going to happen more at Survivor Series, which is only a month away-ish, month and a half. That's quick. And the thing about that is that from watching that show, you already know that guy is going to be a big deal, not just from the way he works and talks, but the way that he's presented on television.
Mm.
He's going to be a big deal. But how many of those other guys are? And so you can totally tell some of them are, and they don't have time in an episode to get everybody over. But if some of these other under guys that they haven't got super concrete plans for are just knocking through squash matches with other people we don't know, then it makes it really hard to tell who is who and to get involved with them.
Yeah. And I don't know, like there's a whole lot of them as well, which is a big part of the problem. Like they basically debuted, I would say, at least 20 new faces, like in the last 3 weeks, and like some of them, you could say, okay, they made their debuts in the like breakout tournament that was happening earlier this year. But that was only like 8 guys who was involved in that, and a lot of them are kind of introducing new gimmicks now as well, like with Andre Chase doing his like Andre Chase University gimmick or whatever it was. Joe Gacy, who's doing like the whole woke warrior thing, which apparently kind of rubbed people the wrong way, but they haven't dropped yet because he was back doing it the following week. But yeah, it's like, okay, they're kind of trying to give some of these guys like gimmicks and stuff that seems a bit more like cartoony in a way compared to the old NXT. Like Ikemen Jiro as well, like his whole gimmick is the fact he just wears a suit jacket when he wrestles, and he's got
with his face on it.
Yeah, he's got like hundreds of these suit jackets which he'll bust out, and it's like, wow, okay, cool, but why?
I mean, I'm not. I like the gimmicks. That could have been one of the problem with some of the old NXT is that a lot of the guys like to see him, and if everybody's gimmick is that they're a wrestler, you're like, you want a little bit of that doesn't automatically mean that you go to a total 180 and just make them all into Repo Man or whatever. But they have to have some kind of identity that I think that might have been lacking from some of the people in the old NXT. They were just there. They were just guys, right? So I like the idea. Yeah, that the guy with the jackets, I don't quite get. Corey was talking to me about that. He's like, you gotta watch this guy. You'll love him. And I'm like, will I? He's just wearing a jacket with his face on it. Like it's kind of like when you watch him in the backstage vignettes and shit. That's funny. But like when he's doing that in the ring, you're like, all right, just okay. Is that gonna help you win the match? I don't think so, but whatever. Like I like the personality being shown. So I like some of the gimmicks. The woke guy, I really liked, and the idea of him getting heat on the internet is like I hope they don't drop it, because I'm like that is exactly the point. You know what I mean? Wrestling's all about working people, and if pro wrestling have created a guy that's spoofing all this woke shit, and then all of those people on the internet get pissed off about it, like then that's exactly what he's supposed to do. Like he's done his job perfectly, and everybody fell for it.
Yeah.
Right. Like I hope they do keep that going, because it just shows how easy it is to actually like. That's the thing that's annoyed me about pro wrestling, is that like, don't be afraid of the heat. That's the point. So long as it's not a crazy offensive gimmick like the Muhammad Hassan thing right after the terrorist business. That's in poor taste, right?
Yeah.
But like getting heat on yourself with a gimmick that people can relate to, that just makes, and if people get hot at it, then that means it works, right? Stick with that shit. I want to see more of that. So I think that's a good idea. I'm not at all opposed to that. Some of the other gimmicks, you're like, okay, well, we'll see how that goes.
There's also that mafia guy.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, the mafia guy, and I'm like, that's an old throwback right there.
Oh yeah, I mean he's really lazily named as well, Tony D'Angelo. It's like, really, you couldn't have come up with like a better name that didn't sound like a generic mobster.
Yeah, but you remember, like, there was the guy at WCW called Tony Marinara.
That wasn't Tony Mamaluke, was it?
It was. I think he changed it. What, didn't he change his name in ECW, or was he Tony Marinara in ECW?
No, he was definitely Tony Mamaluke in ECW. I'm sure he was.
Yeah. So I guess in WCW they were like, yep, this'll, Tony Marinara, he's Italian. Really, that guy?
Yeah.
Tony Marinara, get the hell out of town. Why not call him Tony Spaghetti? Tony seems to be a very Italian name. They really, really play heavily on that, but the laziness of the name aside, at least that guy. But again, we haven't seen him wrestle. That's the important thing. We haven't seen this guy wrestle yet.
Yeah.
We've seen him talk about the family. I get, you're right in that the whole gimmick has a little bit of laziness to it. Like, they're really, in a typical WWE manner, they're really beating you around the head with it. They're really, like, I get, he's definitely Italian, or Italian American, I should say.
Yeah.
We get it now. He's gonna be, I don't know. He's gonna be like, instead of like the green mist, he's just gonna spit like, pasta
spaghetti.
sauce.
Yeah.
Yep. We shouldn't give them ideas. Because they're gonna do it. They never listen to the ideas we have that make their show good, but they always listen to the ones that make the show bad. Which is a shame. But yes, like, I don't mind some of the gimmicks on some of these people. And again, like, the vignettes for that guy at least is a way to get him over without like throwing him into a bunch of squash matches right away.
Yeah.
We're now getting to know this guy a little bit. We can understand him a bit more. And then when he does, like, because he's going to go straight into a squash match too, which makes the other squash matches kind of redundant. Like, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Is that if you see all of these guys having squash matches against everybody, who's the good one? Who's the one we're supposed to pay attention to? And then if this guy who has had this build up and has had these vignettes and shit has a squash match when he debuts, well, he's just as good as the other guys. That's tricky. It also makes it for a very uninteresting television show, which I think might be the biggest criticism of all at the moment. In that, if you're watching that show, like that last one I was talking about, the opening match, Kushida versus Roderick Strong, had all the potential to be great. The closing match, a tag team match, Ridge Holland and Pete Dunne versus Tommaso Ciampa and Braun Breaker. But all of the matches in between that were squash matches.
Yeah, meaningless matches, basically.
Yes. They really had some of them really had no purpose at all. And so that really messes with the flow of the show. It's hard to watch that show if that's the way it works. The old NXT would have, if you had one squash match in there, great, because then you know who to pay attention to.
Yeah.
You know that guy's a big deal if he puts away people in 2 seconds or whatever. He's a big deal. But if you see 5 2-minute matches in a row, then you're like, it's hard to tell the difference. It's hard to differentiate between these people,
I think as well, it gives like the show itself like a real car crash quality, which isn't necessarily a good thing. Like, it's just like wham bam, thank you ma'am, like everything happens so quickly, and then you move on to the next thing, and then like nothing gets a chance to kind of settle or like make a lasting impression. Like you said before, like there was a squash match between I can't remember what their names were, but that's the whole point. The fact that you couldn't remember what their names were after the squash match as well is like, well, what did that accomplish then? Because then, if neither one of these guys stood out from this match enough to kind of make you remember them, then it's not exactly achieving much, haven't it?
Exactly. I couldn't tell you who half those people were. And that's a problem when it doesn't make the people look good. There's a real problem there. But also I feel like watching the show, I don't know about you, but I find that just hard to watch. Not hard to watch, but not fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely.
And again, this could just be because it's the first month and they're trying to get these people over. Because like you said, they went hard with a lot of these new people. In the last 2 weeks, they have done a very good job of making it clear that the entire roster is changed.
Yep.
You're gonna have a handful of like the old regulars, which is a good thing. You've got Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano and his crew. You've got LA Knight, who, God bless him, should be on TV more. That fucking guy can talk. The fact that they're not up to much with him on NXT makes me think they might be bringing him to the main roster soon.
Possibly.
Which is probably going to end badly.
Yeah.
If I know that company. But you've got these kind of veterans, Roderick Strong, Kushida, you got these veterans here. They go along with these, 10, 15 new faces that they've introduced, that they are determined to get over. So it seems like watching that show now, as opposed to watching that show from a month or two ago, the new faces have totally taken over. Like they're very insistent on pushing these new people. It's just about getting the balance right. So it could just be a case of the first month is just them putting people on TV to get everybody used to them. It's a new NXT. Here are the new people. You're going to get used to them. And so therefore, in a month or two after this, you're going to, we can focus on one or two of them at a time instead of just everybody at once. I mean, again, how many times do I use the words like hopefully or maybe they'll do this or, you know, but doesn't that seem like the way it is? Like they're introducing all these people now just so that you get used to them. And then in a month or two, we'll be able to see programs with them. We'll be able to see where they go, and it's just probably the same with the WWE themselves. They're watching to see who can adapt to the pressure and who can really make something of the 2 minutes that they have on TV, right? What JR used to say, always maximize your minutes. You got 2 minutes on TV, make them good.
Yeah, and I think as well, though, like a part of that probably comes from the fact that they have gone in really hard on like selling this as a new NXT and completely different from the old NXT. So maybe the reason why they've like crammed all these new wrestlers onto the shows and not really given them much time and space to kind of breathe and get over has been just because they have been trying to push this concept that this is a completely different NXT now. And then, like you say, once, things settle down a bit, it will kind of evolve into more storylines and programs and whatnot. But then as well, there's also the draft, which is kind of going on at the moment, which is going to shake things up as well. And we've already seen like a few names from NXT have been called up, like Hit Row and Austin Theory.
Have they?
Yeah, man.
Hit Row got called up?
Hit Row got called up, I believe, to SmackDown, and Austin Theory over to Raw, and Aaliyah over to. Yeah. I mean, there's
Austin Theory.
Yeah.
Isn't he with the Garganos?
Well, he was, and then he kind of disappeared for a while, and then he came back for the wedding, and then I guess he's heading off to Raw now.
Well, I forgot that Raw and SmackDown operate in a completely different universe. They just do whatever the fuck they want, don't they? Just like, we want this guy right now, and like, we can't. He's kind of busy with others. Like, fuck it, He's on SmackDown now. Like, oh, okay, well, fair enough. Wow, okay. I haven't been paying attention to the draft because I figure, I'll figure it all out eventually. But wow, hot damn, I didn't know that. Hit Row going up. That's good news for those guys. But don't you think that's a little quick?
Yeah, I mean, Swerve hasn't actually defended the North American title since he won it like 3 months ago. So that's kind of a weird one. And I guess they kind of come together and they were all doing good stuff together as like a unit as well. But, like Top Dollar and Ashanti, the Adonis, and B-Fab, they haven't exactly wrestled many matches in NXT. So it does feel like a bit of a jump for them to go straight up to SmackDown.
It feels like they were really just starting to get settled in and get their groove.
Yeah.
And then for them to get brought up to the main roster, I wouldn't want to preemptively say that this is a bad idea. However, I think that's going to be a bad idea.
Well, we saw what happened when Sanity got brought up to the main roster and SmackDown and how well that went for them.
Really, really well. I mean, I'm pretty sure Eric Young's having a great time now.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Nikki Cross, it paid off for Nikki Cross.
Yeah, but she didn't come up with them.
Oh, that's true. Fuck. All right, well, Sanity's a boss then. Yeah, they ruined it. I mean, I imagine Swerve's going to drop the belt to Santos Escobar.
That's if Santos Escobar doesn't get called up as well.
But they're working. I'm okay. Yeah, I realize that. I'm like, they're working a program, but then I did just say that Raw and SmackDown operate in a completely different fucking system. So, this is why it's hard being the only podcast in time. Have you seen what we have to work with here?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing makes sense in this stupid company. And the one thing that did make sense, which was NXT, they've decided to change, and it's made a lot of people trepidatious about it as to whether or not it's going to continue to make sense. Which is why we're talking about it, because we're wrestling doesn't make sense. That's what we do. So, that whole draft business, I'm not super psyched about that. I know Drake Maverick got called up, right?
Yeah, he went to Raw.
And he's going to be back in NXT, and like either he's going to be back in NXT by the end of the year, or he's going to be fired.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Again, like they're not going to know what to do with that guy. Again,
Well, they've gone right back to the whole 24/7 title stuff, so it's just they've kind of gone back to the well again.
Doesn't bode well, does it? Doesn't bode well for their future. That's a shame, because like we said, NXT was always kind of the bright spot of that whole company, and the draft seems to do more harm than good. Just seems to screw everything up. But you would imagine that all these people are gonna stay where they are right now. Austin Theory being called up kind of adds more to the whole, like, these guys were, he was around in the old NXT. Now we're in the new NXT. You don't want too many of the old familiar faces around. They need to balance it out with the right amount of old NXT veterans with these new guys.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. So they didn't even pick fucking Eli Drake.
Nope.
LA Knight, idiots. Anyway, well, we'll see how that all works out. I'm sure we'll talk about the draft at some point. Or maybe not. Maybe that's the extent of our draft talking. The point is, NXT at the moment, it seems like there is a shift going on. I don't think it's as drastic as people made it out to be once they announced everything. Remember when they first announced it? Like NXT 2.0, and everybody fucking freaked out.
Well, we did a podcast where we were kind of a bit worried about what it was going to look like and speculating, is this the end of NXT and our enjoyment of the brand? But I mean, 2 weeks in, it's not been horrendous. It's not been as good as it once was, but there's still stuff in there that's, good to watch. And there's something sort of like exciting as well about seeing new characters introduced and seeing what they do with them, and like if they can kind of make the most of that opportunity as well. So yeah, I mean, from that perspective, I'm kind of enjoying it to see guys like Braun Breaker make the most of it and stand out, and hopefully I'll find more new favorites like Braun Breaker, and that's all you can ask for, I guess.
I agree. I think that what we've seen so far, we're a little critical of the squash matches because, like we said, it's hard to find somebody to root for with all of that stuff. But like again, like we said, it feels like they're doing that just to get the audience used to these new people instead of just throwing people at you and go, "Oh, it's this guy," and then nobody knows who this guy is, and then pretending he's a big deal. You can't do that, right? And they've done that with other companies. Do that. WWE have done that themselves, where it's like, here's Billy Gibbons. And you're like, I don't know who that is. I don't know why I always go to Billy Gibbons, because he's an actual fucking person.
Yeah.
People know. And I'm like, I got to stop using him as my default name. It's ridiculous. But also, they need to establish these people. And I think that the new NXT is doing a good job of that for the most part. I would like less squash matches, but I feel like they're establishing these people so that in a couple of months' time, we're going to know who they are. We're going to be talking about them. They're going to be trending on Twitter. It's a big deal. They love all that shit. So I don't think it's in a bad shape at the moment. But
no, it's still early days, though.
With that company, you never fucking know. They will they'll find a way to ruin shit. That's what they're good at. That is what they are good at. But yeah, at the moment, NXT, we're not too disappointed with it. But looking forward to seeing where it goes, I think.
Yeah, cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic is a very good way to put that. I think that's very apropos. Is there anything else you want to say about the new NXT?
Well, one thing I was going to mention as well is it's quite interesting that a lot of the second generation or third generation guys who have been brought up basically haven't been given their famous last name, which I guess is WWE going back to the mindset of trying to create their own stars. So if these people ever leave the company and go elsewhere, then they can't take the name that they sort of got famous for in WWE with them. Which you kind of understand the mindset, like it's trying to protect their own investment, I guess you could say. But at the same time, like we said, when you get a guy like Braun Breaker, who is so clearly a Steiner,
yeah,
and had a badass name like Rex Steiner as well that you could have used, and you went for something really generic, and that's actually another thing as well. Like a lot of the guys who have debuted have the most generic and weird and like just unappealing names. Like Braun Breaker is pretty bad, but Brooks
Braun Breaker
Jensen
sounds better than some of the other shit.
Yeah, like they took the son of Bull Buchanan and called him Brooks Jensen.
Like the fuck knows? Like Brooks Jensen. Like that doesn't sound like a fucking.
No, it sounds like a country western singer or something.
Yeah, it's just some fucking schmuck off the street, right?
And then Wayne Bloom's son got turned into Von Wagner.
I mean, that's better. I think that's a little better.
But yeah, there's so many like really basic or just bland names, which I don't think are gonna do a lot of these guys many favors. But hey ho, we'll see how it goes.
Right. Although to be fair, the Bull Buchanan son, you're like, do you really want to? You're like, they're taking away their famous names. I'm like, you're gonna have to search pretty hard for people who fondly remember Bull Buchanan these days. I mean, that guy could work, but they just never find a good gimmick for him.
Well, B squared, man.
Yeah, and how far did that get him? Yeah, he was better in the right to censor. Right to censor is the best. Nobody ever listens. I think that the whole naming situation in the WWE that's a show on its own. Like
Mm.
they have some shocking names sometimes that
And
we've talked about sometimes, haven't we? Michael McGillicuddy.
yeah.
Oh boy. Well, Husky Harris. That's like
There you go.
Jesus Christ.
There was rumors that if Adam Cole had stayed, they were gonna change his name as well because they thought somehow it would be confusing for the audience to have an Adam Cole and then a Michael Cole on commentary.
Well, why not just make him Michael Cole's son and turn it into an angle? Because they love that shit.
Oh, they could go the Daniel Bryan route and just call him Cole Adams or something like that.
Yeah, or I mean, there's lots of stuff they could have done. I mean, like, well, just fire him.
Yeah.
Problem solved. That's the end of that. You know. Yeah, I think that the WWE names is definitely one we could fucking talk about in a different episode. Let us know if you want us to talk about that one because I think that's a good one. We'll see how that goes. But is that it? Are we gonna wrap things up?
I think so.
Okay, so yes, we're cautiously optimistic about the new NXT. We will see how it goes. I mean, if it ends up sucking, you're going to hear about it in a couple of weeks' time. You know, we'll get right on that. But for the moment, we recommend to give a little bit of space, check it out when you get a chance, and see what you think of it. Oh, real quick, who out of all these new guys, except for Bonebreaker, who is your favorite? You don't know because you can't pick any of them out of a lineup.
No, not really.
So in a couple of weeks' time, we're gonna have to see if they could do a better job of establishing those people, and then we'll be able to pick some favorites.
Yeah.
Which would be good. But we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks' time. We'll give it some space. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, guys. We're gonna be back soon with another episode about God knows what, about the wacky world of professional wrestling. We'll see how that goes. You never know what it's gonna be, so make sure to subscribe to stay involved and all that other shit. You know all that stuff. So we're going to say thank you very much for listening, and we will see you guys in the next episode. So goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. There we go. That's an episode.